Good evening and welcome to Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and tonight I am going to rant again. We tried our first, my first rant a couple weeks ago. We talked about power versus speed jumping, and I wanted to try something of a similar vein. So tonight's topic, for those of you that are interested, is my one of my favorites to harp on. The most heinous crime as a high jumper, or the thing that causes the most problems from beginning to end, is a pet peeve or number one downfall of many jumpers, and that is taking off too close to the bar. So we're going to talk about that at length and why it's so detrimental to the high jump. So, one of the many things that I have dealt with in the last 30 something years of coaching the high jump is basically getting athletes to be in the right position. So many times I've talked with, parents, other jumpers, coaches, other competitors of mine, whoever is talking and observing someone else jump, and are just talking to myself, watching my own athletes, going through their training. I'm like, man, if I could just get them to the right place, when they take off, because many times these athletes are just jumping, just crazy, awesome, way up in the air, but they miss. And you're watching the height, and even an untrained eye would look at it and go, man, they should have made that. They were way over, way over the bar. So, why is that? How does that work out? And why do athletes, miss the bar even after, exerting a tremendous effort off the ground and getting all kinds of air? So, this is one of the things that has come to me, and mostly, as most of my things are, they are observed over time. And I have the unique advantage of having jumped at a decent level and also coaching now for a long time and seeing a lot of jumps. And after a while, you just start to see the same things over and over. And you're like, wow, I should be able to fix this somehow. And I would like to say that I have cured this, but I have not. So it is a battle. But the taking off too close to the bar, let's go through that. So, as I've taught here on Raise the Bar before, and if you have seen any of my High Jump 101 Zoom classes, shameless self plug for those right now, you can get to those on my Instagram. If you go to my, link at the bottom of my bio page, my link tree, you will see High Jump 101. And in High Jump 101, I discussed the five phases of the high jump that I've broken down very simply and chronologically. The straight part of the approach, there is a curve part of the approach. So the straight and the curve make up the J approach, commonly called. And that is the longest two parts of the jump, and combined together, probably twice as long as any other phase. And then phase number 3, so I go straight, curve. 3 is takeoff, consisting of arm and knee drive. And phase 4 is flight. Flight is the only phase of the high jump that should continue to increase as we get better in our technique and our application of things. We need to get higher and higher, longer and longer flights to get over higher and higher bars. It makes kind of, sense. And then phase 5 is the layout position. And what many high jumpers today will say, my form sucks, and you're like, what do you mean? I watch you and you run pretty good. You got a good knee drive. And they are always, when they say their form sucks, almost always talking about how they look going over the bar. And if it's a pretty layout, and, are they in control of it? Do they make bars because of it? That whole idea. So, where they take off, to me, has the most application. I mean, if you've heard me teach on this before, running the straight part of the curve, high cycling and all that, running the curve itself, which I believe is of monumental importance to get jumpers to jump really high. My contention there is that the the curve. There are plenty of athletes, basketball players and volleyball players in particular, who can jump out of the building, and they have very unique skill sets in that they can be running, and pretty much, some basketball players will curve as they're going around to the basket, but for the most part, people will run straight lines and kind of lean back, heel toe, go up and jump straight up, do whatever they need to do if they're dunking a basketball, grabbing a rebound, and or in volleyball, either blocking or hitting, right? If I jump up on 2 feet, I do what I do, and I land on 2 feet, I can guarantee you for the most part that I didn't run a curve to do that. In the high jump, we take off on 1 foot, not two, like those events can. Basketball players can take off on one or two, and so can volleyball players. They don't usually run curves because they're not going to flip over and land on their backs like we do in the high jump. So the curve adds a lot to those things, but I'm wandering off. I'm famous for this. So we were talking about takeoff, and in particular, taking off too close to the bar. So one of the things that I will see over and over on film that will let me know what's going on here is when somebody goes to take off and you see their arms coming up, okay? Many times, if they are too close to the bar, they will shut their arm drive off because they are literally so close to the bar that they're afraid of either knocking it off with their elbow as they're driving their arms up, okay? And that's kind of crazy when you look at it, but I see it all the time. Even when we're doing backovers, I will have athletes reach back with their arms behind them and then swing their arms to jump, and they will shorten their arms. They will bend them instead of extending for more power. I always call that reach for power. They will bend their arms and then swing them. And 9 times out of 10, I believe that that's because they already feel. And again, the brain is an amazing supercomputer. And once you have done a couple jumps, even if you've never had any training, your brain starts to learn pretty much where you are in space and where you need to be in space in order to make certain things happen. And so sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but it does start making judgments, and it starts noticing things, and it notices patterns, and it notices what you're doing. It notices everything, and keeps a record of it, of course, which you can always go back and try to check. I think our ability to access those things is, one of the many mysteries of how incredible our brains are, and where do we get that storage, or get those things out of storage. But anyway, if I'm too close to the bar, I will shorten my arms. I will, even before doing just a regular backover jump, because I'm too close. And the same thing goes on a regular jump. If I'm coming in, I'm too close. You'll see people, they'll be like this. They'll be shrugging, and if I'm right on top of the bar, I'm already, I call it being jumping in a phone booth. If you are running and you decided to jump in a phone booth and try to jump up through the ceiling of the phone booth while traveling at high speed, you would invariably have to be kind of like this and go, just try to jump up without hitting your elbows on the walls. And most of us, they don't have phone booths anymore because we all have cell phones. But if you've ever been inside of a phone booth, it's really tight. And so, I call that's the visual I get when somebody's right on top of the bar. They look like they're jumping in a phone booth. They're even in the middle of driving their arm up or their knee drive or something. They're worried about knocking the bar off. And if that's happening, you're too close. Okay. So what is the problem with being too close to the bar? Number one, you're affecting your takeoff mechanics. We just talked about that. If I'm blissfully unaware, maybe I run through and bam, just as I'm flinging my arms over my head, bing, there goes my elbow right into the bar. Some people will throw their heads back right away, bang, right into the bar. Maybe I drive my knee up into it. That would be really, really close to the bar, but I've seen those things happen. So, that's obvious as to why not to do it. But even on a smaller to bigger scale, if I'm too close and I start to go up and my peak height is still to be attained, I'm still going up. And if I'm too close and my parabola is really wide, or maybe I'm not hitting vertical, I'm going towards the bar a little bit, but I've got some decent speed and pops, I might go up, and then right up here at the peak, hopefully would be the bar. Well, if I'm too close when I'm doing this, here I go sailing, and the bar should be here, but it's, over here. It was too close when I went up. If my height's way behind the bar, I'm probably knocking it off already as I'm going up. Okay. Those are the things that you notice. Again, as a coach, I'm like, wow, he knocked it off on the way up, but look where he kept going. Okay. Or she way back here. So I'm like, wow, they're just too close. Okay. Now, that's an easy fix. Sometimes you will look at it and go, well, this is really easy. And it doesn't always work. You say, I'll just move them farther out. So you say, okay, let's move you, a foot farther back. You got to be careful because an athlete who has not been jumping for very long or doesn't have a whole lot of experience with their own bodies or their own stride lengths or whatever, you got to give them a couple really good things. Number one, you say, do you know how many steps you're taking? The answer, I'm here to tell you, young coaches, parents, invariably, no. They do not count their steps. They have no idea how many they're taking. If you put the mark down here, they will start running and jump. And lots of times the body gets into a certain rhythm from a certain place and everything looks wonderful. Run, 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 jump. And if you're watching them, I start counting because that's the way I was trained. And I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, great. That all looks wonderful. I say, okay, you're taking 7 steps. Or they might nod and go, okay, 7 steps. Are they counting them? No. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just running and jumping. So when I say move a foot farther back, that can have enormous ramifications. They can be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, they don't do any math. They don't sit there and go, oh, in 7 steps, I'm moving a foot farther back. So that means 7/12 of an inch. How do I multiply a fraction? They don't know. They might think that they have to now speed way up or overstride, and all of a sudden everything's changing rapidly and you get a crash into the bar or a refusal to jump because my steps are off. If you haven't heard that yet, you will. If your steps are off, it's one of the worst things in the world for a high jumper, especially under time crunch. They call your name and you go, you got a minute to jump. That's totally different. If you're in practice, you can try to figure it out. If you're at a meet, they go, okay, Haines, you're up, 2nd attempt. And I'm like, okay. And I run up and something's off. It's just off. And I know it's off. That's the worst thing in the world because I will walk up and all of a sudden I'm like, and I shut it down and I run by because I was taught to do that too. And I've taught myself to do that, my athletes to do that. So I don't want to waste the jump. But now it's 30 seconds, you only had a minute to start. It takes 10 seconds to go up and you come back around. And the whole time your brain is running around in its own cage like a little rat. It's just like going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do? You've got to calm yourself and say, okay, what did I do? Did I start off on the wrong foot? Did I change my rhythm? Did I not count my steps? And I'm telling you, terrible place to be in. So for a beginner, maybe it's not that traumatic, but simply moving them farther back, it may fix it and it may introduce other problems. But if everything else stays the same, they run up same speed and they jump from farther back and they do the exact same thing that you just saw, hopefully, and they go up and now they're farther out. Well, now, hopefully, as they go up, the bar was put in the right spot and now they're okay. Can't remember which side. I think I was doing it this way. Okay. So if you got them far enough out and they recopy exactly the way they did it the other time, they go up and now the bar is directly under them when they hit their peak. Voila, you have fixed a problem. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. And a lot of times it depends on the level, the maturity, how level meaning how high, experience meaning how long they've been at the event. But if they decide, if they're running up to the bar and I say, I want you farther out, sometimes you can see it in their eyes. They're like, okay, well, if I'm farther out here, I got to change my trajectory because I got to go a long way over here to get into this pit now, and they don't understand the way, the high jump works at its higher levels. Number one, speed is important. I need to get an athlete accelerating, not just speed, I should say acceleration, but the acceleration, which is an increase in speed. As I'm getting to the bar, that creates lift, and the lift does generate this little parabolic pattern that we see when you throw anything off of this earth. It goes up, And at a certain point, the earth grabs it and pulls it back down. And that tends to be a perfectly symmetrical parabolic orbit with a, highest point. And that's where we would like to be when we jump, and put the bar right under there. And, we can do what we got to do. So moving them farther out could fix the problem. But then as the bar goes up, they may be like, oh, no. And then they don't see it. We're like, no. And you can show them all the Barshim videos you want, which I do. I say, hey, watch Barshim here. He's like 7 feet. It looks like. I've never measured it and I've never seen him in person, but I can tell he's way the F out there. Okay. So he's running so fast and hitting such a high vertical at takeoff, and then waiting, climbing up to jump 711 as many times as he has, 243, I think, more than anybody, even Sotomayor. You look at that and you're like, see, that's what's going to take. But to them and to me, I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm not Barshim, but the concept is the same. So that's one fix. Okay. The second fix, I tell my athletes both. So, well, if you're want to make sure that you're going to go up and over and into the pit, I go, we got to do two things. We move you farther away, so you're not going right into it at the beginning. We talked about being too close. So I can move them farther out. But if they start bailing, moving them farther out doesn't fix the problem. Now they're just bailing right into the bar, bail, bail, bail. And bailing is almost, I would say, is worse in some ways than being too close. Obviously, if I'm blowing through my vertical at takeoff, now I'm creating another monster. So we got to be really careful. Hitting vertical off the curve at takeoff is huge. The closer I am to hitting vertical, the cleaner it is that I'm going up. I'm going to get higher heights before I start to peak out and do what I got to do. My contention is that it's a much easier to hit vertical at slower speeds, right? And we got into this when we talked about power versus speed jumpers. Power jumpers tending to be a little bit slower. I know there's probably power jumpers out there that are offended. They're saying I'm really, really fast. I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe it was just me because I didn't have any speed, and was a decent power jumper, but I have seen people run really, really fast. And those people I don't think of as power jumpers because they don't slow down and gather and power up. They're so busy running, they're kind of real quick. It's like, and they're, they may or may not get their hands up really high. They may or may not drive that knee really hard. And so it's a different style. But anyway, too close, death in many ways. Now, there are some jumpers who have amazingly adapted to being too close. And in some ways, I'm starting to learn the flip of this, because when I first started doing this, to tell the story, I had a jumper named Jack Weissman. Jack, if you're out there, we're talking about you. Jack was one of my second year in the business, second or third year in this business. And I recruited him out of Huntington Beach. He was a junior who had just gone to CIF here in California and had done okay at CIF. I don't believe he had won it. He made it to the Masters meet, which he'd been to before. The Masters meet was the Southern California part of CIF that if you come in the top certain number, you can go up to the state finals. Well, he hadn't made that jump yet. And so he jumped 6'4" at that meet, and he needed to jump 6'6". And I had trained another jumper that Jack used to just routinely beat. And Kevin Schmidt had gotten better. And Kevin, if you're out there, we're talking about, Kevin went to Cal Poly Pomona, or no, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I always make that mistake. They're both the Mustangs. So, after Jack beat him for a while and Kevin beat him, Jack came over, long story short, and we started training. And I had always told him that the other times I bumped into him, I said, hey, Jack, man, you should come train with me. But I was also saying, dude, if we can just get you a little bit farther away from the bar, it'd cure all your problems. Let me tell you that me getting Jack farther away from the bar is one of the hardest things that I have ever done as a coach. It was not, if it would have been as simple as let's move your approach back 6 inches and learn how to take off from there, we would have done, who knows what else. But we literally spent quite a while trying to get over that, because I've got videos after videos after videos of Jack doing exactly what I just said, taking off too close, pretty good takeoff mechanics, very flexible young man, perfect height to weight ratio. I mean, like 6'2", 160, 155, I don't know. Just fast and tall and light. He had everything you needed, flexibility, the whole thing. And in my contention, since he was so close, he would start to drive his knee up, he'd start to drive his hands up, and then he would have to ditch out of that almost immediately because he was so close. And his drive knee would come up. So he's coming through here. And then all of a sudden, he's got to pop his hips and throw his hands back to his, pop his knee down to pop his hips up, get his hands back to his hips, throw his head back, all those things because he was out of room and out of time. Okay. So there's a certain point where you got to get your butt up. As you can see in this picture right behind me here, you need to get your butt up to get it over the bar, right? And we all know the reason well, we don't all know, you should know that the Fosbury flop is technically your center of mass when you're going over the bar is lower than the bar itself because of all your body parts and the way that they're arched and all that. There can be a significant part of your body down below the bar, even while your hips are going over. So it's very economical and very beneficial. Takes less work than some of the other styles like the straddle, where you have to roll your whole body over at one point. A scissor, for instance, would be very, very ineffective. I think Barshim has jumped 243 with the regular flop and maybe 215 or 217 or something. I think he's scissor kicked like 7'1.5". It's wildly inefficient. It's a great drill, to hit vertical with. But anyway, we digress. And so if it would have been that easy for Jack to just move him out, that'd have been one thing. But man, he'd been jumping for a while, and it's a habit. And when you have habits, man, it can be really hard to get rid of them. So we did a lot of different, things, and put a piece of tape on the ground. So try to jump from outside the tape. He would just go right over the tape. And even though you could show him on the video and say, hey, look at this, your hips are a foot behind the bar. And he'd be in this outrageously great position, way up and over. And you're like, and he'd keep catching with his feet. So I always tell everybody, so look, here's the bar. Here's you going over the bar, like the picture here. If you're hitting it with your head, what does that mean? You're either throwing your head back too early, or rarely you're too far out. If you're catching the bar with your hips, it could be a timing issue, but you're pretty much spot on. Again, if you look at this picture, hips over the bar right there in the middle where the high arch is, okay, great. If I'm catching it with my knees, the back of my knees, my calves, or my heels, I'm either late pulling my feet over and or too close. I'm catching it, my hips are getting higher and behind the bar, and I'm dragging my calves or whatever. And Jack would do that, routinely. And so, yeah, let's move farther out. Tape didn't work. So then we put down a foam block. Now, he'd either step over it, step on it, or not pull the trigger and not jump. So I invented this drill. I called it the roll out the bar drill. You may have seen it on posts, but I basically put a second crossbar down on the ground, rolled it right up against the standard. So it's literally only, depending on the size of the standard, maybe it was 4 inches away from the plane of the bar, which most people aren't going to get that close. Some do, most don't. But, base of the standard, within a foot or so of that, there's all kinds of jumpers that pull the trigger from in there. And no matter how, even an old man like me will say, hey, even from 4 feet, watch, and I will purposely take off 3 feet out and go up and go over. You say, you can do this kind of a thing. It doesn't always matter. Again, because those spatial relationships, I believe, are in your brain. And if you've had success making heights doing that, that's fine, right? And your brain starts to learn. I says, oh, when I do this, this generally works. What brain has trouble with is when what generally works stops working. And one of my favorite sayings is, as the bar goes up, it reveals more and more technique flaws. And it may not sound right to you, but if you think about it, if I get 100 people that have never high jumped before, put the bar really low and let them run up and jump, you're going to see a myriad of jumping styles. And the bar's a foot off the ground, you're going to see a lot of people have success. And they may mistakenly think that that's going to continue to work. You put it up to 2 feet, say you're skipping a foot at a time right away, but 2 feet isn't very high. You run up and maybe that same thing works again. It's not until it stops working that it makes you examine. You either say, well, that's it, right? I topped out at 3 feet. I don't think I could make 3.2 or 3.6. Maybe I could. So you go, well, what do I do? And you say, well, if you're going to continue doing that technique, the only thing you can do is get stronger because sometimes the technique is so terrible. There's so many things wrong with it that you're like, you're either going to have to be the Hulk and just get strong, or you're going to have to change something about what you're doing. So with that, that was a struggle because Jack spatially was used to a certain spot. So anyway, we put the bar at the base of the standard. I said, run up and jump however you want. And we were doing scissor steps, 5 steps, scissor kicks. And I had the bar like at 5 feet because Jack was good. And I think he jumped, like I said, 6'4" as a junior. I think he'd done the same thing as a sophomore, 6'4", maybe even, I think he jumped 6'6" by then, either one or both of those years. So he wasn't without skill and he wasn't without having achieved a certain level. And so, man, that was once he made his first one, then I very simply rolled the bar one circumference around and had I think I had the edges off or whatever. But if I didn't, oh no, I had it sitting flat like the ground was a standard. Then I would just roll it a whole turn and land it on its edges again. And it would be, an inch or two farther out. At the beginning, no problem, right? You'd run through, scissor up, boom, done. Roll it again. So we called it the roll the bar out drill. And we just continued to do that. And by the time we got to that drill, I said, well, here's the deal. Once you get into an area where it's a little bit uncomfortable, you're going to know that you need to make sure that you stay behind it. So we just kept moving him as the bar was rolling towards him. Remember, the crossbar was set at 5 feet. As he was doing his curve, he's accomplished. He's pretty much in the same spot all the time. He said, hey, we're going to keep moving you back. And as another beginner tip out there, for the most part, what I teach my clients is, and I'd be happy to hear if anybody else does it, something different, is just continue to move farther back. Now, you could move up if you were overstriding or all of a sudden the wind came up and it was cutting into your speed. And you're like, okay, I have to move up because I'm just not, either I'm getting tired or I'm running into a killer headwind all of a sudden. You may actually have to move up. But as you're getting better and better and you're jumping higher, I teach farther and farther out, more speed. You got to keep all the other stuff the same. So a lot of problems with that too. We can talk about it another time. But so I just said, Jack, every time we roll the bar, we're moving it back an inch or 2 inches. You move back an inch or 2 inches. And that makes it easy. You say, we should still run the same approach each time. Because the first time he did the scissor kick, he looked like, 6 inches over the bar. So he just said, I just want you to go farther out and continue to do this. And he did. And I by the end, it looked like we had him 3 or 4 feet away. And when he would scissor, he would drive the one knee up and he would literally have to leave it up for a while and then pull the other leg over at the end. And he was running fast. It was a 5-stepper, so the whole curve. And that was the beginning of starting to fix that problem for Jack. He actually came to like that drill so much that he was like, Coach, can we put the bar on the ground, all the time? And I was like, I didn't want to have it become a crutch. And my simple answer was, well, we can do it occasionally, but really, now that you're starting to get the idea, we got to get used to that because in competition, you can't go, hey, could you bring out an extra crossbar and lay it on the ground for me, please? They're not going to do it. So a nice training tip. However, I get another jumper now who does the same thing. And Jack and I had this battle going back and it took quite a while. And we started in the summer and it was, we had a year basically almost to where we got around to the next, his senior year and state meet and all that. And, it would still, I swear he jumped 6'9" at state finals and came in third. He won the Masters meet at 6'10". And at 6'10", I think he was at about the right spot. When he jumped 6'9" at state, I swore he was still too close. I'm like, you need more time. As the bar goes up, you need more time to go up, a little bit farther out, a little more attack speed, right? Trying to hit vertical still. So that was one part of that battle. The arm drive, knee drive, and then, okay, not just spatially, arms hitting the bar on the way up, knees hitting the bar up. I mean, once I'm out, okay, out. That's not going to happen right away. As the bar goes up, I can come through and hit vertical. And one of the things I've learned about this, those of you that are listening to this with any interest, the being too close to the bar thing is interesting because one of the other contentions I have is that knee drive angle, okay, and I preach it's got to come across the hip. I call that across the hip. So if you're a left-legged vaulter like I was, or vaulter, sorry, jumper, and my right leg is my drive knee, I learned quickly that if I did not drive my knee across where I was running, I would go over kind of quickly and sideways. I wouldn't rotate, and get my back to the bar. So my high school coach taught a drill that I use to this day, which is to run straight at the bar and then really drive your knee around. So you've got to do a complete 180 to get your back to the bar. When I've seen and studied most of the great jumpers that I have seen, and by great, I mean anything higher than what I did, but in general, you can tell 7.6, 7.7, 7.8. You start really, really getting up there. Stephen Holm has one of the greatest up and across knee drives I've ever seen. And Barshim has one, and Derek Druin has one, or had one. Bondarenko, they all tend to get this down. Otherwise, and when I should say most, because there are people out there who, don't have as pristine of technique as some other people, and they may just be either more talented or just persevere and figure out how to make that work at a high level. Not everybody that jumps really, really high has perfect technique. I'm here to tell you. Some people are just gifted, like with a perfect body type, and I would say they get away with a lot of stuff. Where some people have to be really good technicians because maybe they're not as gifted slash talented physically, genetically than others. Some may have had to learn how to get every last bit. Here we would get into the issue of what I would call efficiency. And I don't know how we would measure that unless you had some kind of a way to say, you were given as physical gifts these things, and you have maximized your talents, my son. And it sounds like a biblical thing, but here's what you did with your talents. Now, if you were able to get 100% of what you were given, that's what everybody's goal would be, right? Some people I look at, I'm just like, man, they're just so tall, and they're fast, and they, maybe they don't have that knee come across and they still jump over stuff. And you're like, well, I know that when I teach someone who's a lot shorter and, has some other gifts, they're fast, they're flexible, blah, 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 but they better get that knee across, right? So anyway, with getting someone too close to the bar, if they're right on top of it and they don't want to just smack into it on the way up, and maybe they don't realize how close they are, it's quite possible. Some of these athletes that I've had that come to, they have no idea that that's a bad thing. Well, what do? That inside arm that's close to the bar, they don't drive it across this way because they'll smack it right on the bar. So what do they learn how to do? They start driving it up, which is one of the things that I'm trying to get the people to do that are farther away. The farther away people tend to just go like this because they have the room and they use it, but not necessarily to their advantage. My contention is all of your long bones should be pointed away from the pit at takeoff. And by the speed and force of your curve, get pulled up to vertical right as you're finishing your arm drive and your knee drive. And anything that, is pointed towards the bar while I'm taking off, I believe is, not helping. Anything that's pointed straight up is good. Anything that's pointed back into the curve is outstanding. And that's exactly what the knee drive does. So the knee drive angle, when someone's right on top of the bar, you'll see that inside arm tends to come back towards the curve so that they don't go towards the pit. So instead of going this way, they want to end up here. And in order to end up here, they've got to start here away, right? Well, that knee drive angle and the arm drive angle can both benefit in some ways to fix it by being right on top of the bar, because man, I'd better I had better drive my knee across, and I'd better get that arm to go this way. Because if I go like this, I'm just going to end up sore from smacking various body parts on the bar and frustrated because I'm never going to make a bar. So that's one way, just as an aside. I do use that. I'm actually starting to use that on purpose where I say, okay, I'm going to move you way too close. So this is our attempt at driving the knee across, driving the arm across, and then you, it's kind of like the reverse effect, right? So I'm overcompensating on the knee drive and the arm drive. Then you move them farther out and they feel like they're being let out of prison. And if they can still execute the knee drive and the arm drive from farther out, you've cured everything. So I am learning. I am learning because I foolishly thought that since Jack really kind of forced me into this whole new area of how do I fix a kid who's too close? So the Jack Wiseman story was the roll out the bar drill. I'm here to tell you the roll out the bar drill does not fix everybody. It fixed Jack to a point, but it doesn't work for everybody. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Now I know, right? We all like our formulas. Now I know how to fix people like that. Yeah, try another one, right? Not everybody does the same fixes, which is one of those things you learn when you've been around for a long time. I have long ago stopped trying to make kids do exactly the things that I did. I can tell them trends. I can say, this is what I've seen. In my experience, this tends to happen when this thing that you're doing happens this way. You tell them, and okay, and from there, you go. But I don't usually watch a kid take a jump and then go, hey, I got it. I know exactly what we need to do with you. First thing is you got to do this. And secondly, we do this. Now, if they start running the bar and they're not cycling their knees up and they're not running and their arms, are all over the place, I'm like, I know I need to teach them to run. That's pretty simple. It's simply seen. Getting them to run, now it's a battle. But I can start there and then I can watch them run up the bar. Maybe they very naturally reach both arms back and drive them up. In which case I'm like, oh, great. Maybe they're a double arm power guy like I was. Okay. I watched the knee drive. What are they doing with their knees? Do they drive the knee up? Do they leave it up? Which I like. Not necessary. I've seen some out there, and some of you would argue, guys like Ivanyuk from the Soviet Union. Is he Soviet Union or Russia or I forget? Ukraine. He might be Ukrainian. I can't remember. Finished really high in 2021, and his knee drive angle was awesome, but he would drive the knee across, and almost as soon as he's out the ground, he would drop it, which I don't preach, but again, he would ride it up and over, and he jumped 7.9 a couple times that year, and I think he finished, I want to say fifth. I think he finished fifth. He had Barshim and Tamberi split the gold. That's first and second, really, but two first. Third was Yo from South Korea. And then I believe Ivanya took fifth, but he's way up there. There's a lot of great jumpers at the Olympics last time. Brandon Stark was way up there. Our own guys, were jumping really well. Javon Harrison jumped, I think he jumped 7.8 3/4, 236, like Doug Nordquist did way back in the day. And I think he finished ninth or something. It's like pretty amazing. 7.8 3/4 won the Olympics in 1984. You jump 7.8 3/4 in 2021 and you get ninth. So that's pretty amazing. And correct me out there if I'm wrong. I'm sure I am on some of these things. But anyway, so I'm getting older. I don't always remember all the numbers and all that. But so too close, not a good thing. Okay. I've got to drive my knee up. I'd like to leave it up for what I teach for the most part. And again, maybe at the higher levels, not as important. If I've got somebody who's super fast and does a lot of things really well, I would like to say you got to leave it up, ride it up to wherever you're going to get off at the bar, and then, go into your layout. If you're too close to the bar, you cannot ride the knee very long. You are forced to drop it down, get your hips up, and start to get your head back because you're out of time. That's the biggest thing. Being too close to the bar will steal from your riding time or flight. What I call the knee drive is one of your takeoff mechanics: arm drive, knee drive, right? Knee ride is what I would equate to flight. If I drive my knee up, my toe comes off the ground, and I keep that knee up, I am now flying. And then hopefully I ride that knee up to where it's equal to the bar. If my knee gets all the way to the bar, guess what? My hips are there. Okay. My hips are what I need to get over. So at that point, if I'm pretty much within the neighborhood, whether either plus or minus an inch or two, I've got enough if I can get my timing on my layout. But if I'm too close and I need to leave that knee alone for a while to get up to a certain height and I can't because I'm too close, it's a problem. So, and in my experience, it's so rare. There are times. I just had a kid last year, CIF finals here in California, Division I, and I saw him at some of the earlier jumps. I'm like, man, that kid is out there. He's far away from the bar. And, at 6 feet and 6'1" or 2, I think he made the bar. And then, there's a couple things that happened. He didn't have the most consistent approach. Speed varied. And I thought his foot was a little too closed to the bar at takeoff, which I'm not a big fan of. I like parallel, but some people say, no, you got to point your foot at the back corner of the pit. Like, I don't really like that, but I've seen some do it and some people can get away with it. So anyway, he was way out there. And I remember thinking, man, he might be on the borderline of too far out, but it's rare. Most times in my experience, people are too close. And again, what does that do? Okay. As a quick review, they're either going to be affecting their takeoff mechanics. Okay. Arm drive, it's got to not be able to extend because I don't have time to do it. Number one, I've got to get my hands back down to my hips and into my layout position. And I also, even if I do finish my knee drive as high as I should, which I might not if I'm too close, I can't leave it up. I can't ride it up there. So that affects my flight in a negative way. And some people would argue, say, no, you don't need to have that because your center mass, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, my legs are pretty big. When I rise my leg up, I have changed my center of mass significantly. I don't want to put it back down. I think that changes my center of mass. So I may or may not be correct on the physics, but it is what it is. So I drive that knee up and I leave it up, and then whatever. If I can't because I'm too close, I've just seen the negative effects. Layout position is another one. If I am too close and I am forced into what I call the C position, that's like this. And most of us see in this position go, oh, that looks great if you turn it on its edge. When I'm like this, just like the figure behind me here, right? Looks like a little rainbow, or what I call a slinky position. Okay. Your head and your feet, when on the same level, you're like the rainbow or the slinky position. And as soon as your head gets lower than your feet, the rotation out of that is amazing. Now, you could argue, is it the chicken or the egg? Okay. Well, my contention is if I'm still going up and I throw my head back early, I have very, very rarely seen people get away with this move. Now, they have to when they're too close. But if they're starting here, and especially if they're in this position almost during takeoff, while they're still pushing off the ground, it paradoxically, even though you're thinking, oh, they're starting to lay out sooner, they should spin around faster. It's completely wrong. It takes too long. If my hips are down under the bar and my feet, if the bar's coming through here, I've got more of me that I got to wait to get around and then get back to the slinky position, right? But if I can wait as I go up, you watch Barshim, he's coming over here, he hits vertical. Then as he's going up, he will start to come across. We all do. We all start here up to vertical, and then we go across. So he comes here, he goes up, but he waits and waits and waits and waits. And I believe he waits till he can see down the bar. And then he's getting closer and closer to horizontal. Okay. And that's where he can then pop his hips, throw his head down, his hips come up, and you get that outrageous rotation. A lot easier to get into this position if I wait till I'm horizontal to do it. Okay. Because then I just go boom, right? If I'm still going vertical and then I go into this position, now I got to wait a longer time to get all the way around. And you hear that all the time, right? People go, oh man, that was a great position. If you could have just held it longer. My contention is I should learn how to hold my layout about the same every time, because if I can ride the knee and get myself faster, a better lean, faster approach and rhythm, and therefore a better flight, my layout should basically be the same every time. So to finish up, I'm going to say that one again. If you look at the 5 phases, straight ahead, then curve, takeoff mechanics is 3, flight is 4, layout is 5. Okay, as the bar goes up, I may be running faster from farther away, so that time will either be the same or maybe even drop. Okay, I may get faster on my approach, even if it's a longer ways out. If I'm really running fast, I'm going to cover that ground quickly. So I could get a shorter straight on phase. I could get a shorter in duration in time, even if it's from longer distance, like I said, curve. Flight is not going to get shorter. It's going to get longer, right? I'm sorry. I skipped a phase. Takeoff mechanics. From heel strike to toe off, that, as I go faster, is going to get quick. Now, as I take a longer last step, and those of you that know about penultimate and last steps and all those kinds of things know that I'm supposed to get that foot way out in front of me so that I can stop my momentum from going right into the pit and convert it into lift. Should be fast, however, both long and fast. Stop, go up. Okay. I could see that one getting longer, but not by a lot. I mean, it will, if I'm getting faster, get faster. So it should be on and off the ground quickly. But if the step is longer and I'm farther back, it's going to take me a while to swing all the way through and get up off of that toe. But again, here we're talking about tenths of a second at the most. Okay. So comparatively, that phase is pretty much the same. So I've got 3 phases in a row, straight, curve, and takeoff, which are either pretty similar as I'm getting higher and higher heights, or they may actually be getting quicker, the first 2 for sure. And again, I need numbers to back this up. So again, these are just observations over time. I believe they're all really, really close. And it's obvious logically that as I jump higher, my flight has to get longer, significantly longer. The difference between 6'4" and 7'4" measured in flight time has to be more. Now, if I jump over 6'4" with the same jump that I jumped over 7'4", then you could say, well, they're the same. But if I make it by a foot, sure. Do I need that much jump to make 6'4"? Obviously not. So if I just cruised up and did my own 6'4" version, I would have less flight time than my 7'4" version, if that makes sense. If you're good enough to throw that same jump every time, it's a different argument. But, then again, if I went from 7'4" up to 8'4", theoretically, I'm guaranteeing that my flight would have to be longer. So again, first 3 phases, the same, maybe a little quicker, maybe a little slower, but relatively pretty much the same. Flight is going to get longer. And then again, I teach if you're going to lay out, if you teach someone, you go, look, everything you do is perfect. Your layout position is crappy. As soon as we fix that, you're going to jump 6 inches higher. I said, okay, what do you do when you throw the perfect layout and the bar's going like this, it's your new PR and you just squeaked everything over it. You started too early, but you threw your head back and you're so flexible and everything. You just held it forever and you rotated all the way around. You pulled your feet really hard and it hit the bar and it's wobbling and you get out. You're like, please stay on. And everybody high fives you. And, you're now a 6'8" jumper or you're a 6'10" jumper, 7-footer, maybe you jump 7'3". And at that point, my question is, okay, that was great. I'm like everybody else, dude. Awesome. High five. That's great. What are you going to do when the bar goes up now? Because I don't know if you can get any more layout than you just did. If you just did the most perfect one you've ever done, then you can't do it again at the next higher height because logically I have to get 2 inches higher before I do that. Unless I can increase my flexibility and hold that arch longer, those are really hard to milk inches out of after a while. Some people have terrible positions over the bar, and you can make an improvement there and pick up a couple jumps for sure. I teach it all the time, but I don't see it as the fail safe or the fallback, to increase jump height, by getting a better layout. I'd rather work on, hey, we got to pick up speed. We got to get a better tilt away angle, right? Faster curve, better transition through, higher arm and knee drive, right? Better takeoff mechanics. Therefore, 1, 2, and 3 straight curve and takeoff leads to a better 4. Now we're talking more flight. The higher I get off the ground, then yeah, however we're getting over the bar, if you're really going across, you gotta get those hips up and head back, and all that has to happen fast. If you're going up more and then peaking out, stalling, and then starting to come down, you're going to actually have a little bit of time up here, and you're going to have to figure out how to be in a nice position. And so there's differences there, but again, I don't think you can milk it, for how the great layout is going to save you. So in review, too close, death. Okay. As the bar goes up, most of the best jumpers in the world, I believe, would tell you that they will continue to move farther and farther out. If they don't, maybe their mechanics are getting better at higher speeds when they take off from the same spot. But I'm here to tell you that as a competitor, when you go higher, for the most part, high jumpers will tend to get faster. They tend to get more aggressive. We've learned that you have to. Now there can be too much. I may be going too fast to handle my curve. If my curve isn't good enough to handle that speed, or if I can't get ready because I'm moving so fast, I can't get my arms ready to jump. And again, that comes one of our arguments about power versus speed. But there's lots of things that go into that. But if I'm, again, too fast, I blow through. So that, can become a problem. But I got to use that speed to try to find lift. And you can see it when guys like Barshim are jumping at lower heights. They're just like everybody else. You're not going to throw a 710 jump, a 711, 243 at a 210 bar. It's 30 centimeters of overkill, right? Don't need it. So what do? You cruise up there. You don't have to hit that speed. And I'm here to tell you, you only have so many of those in you. So it would behoove you to figure out what your rhythm patterns are. Can I get away with, my good friend Alan Henkel used to time Doug Nordquist on his approach speeds. And I remember at the time when he did that, I'm like, oh, I've never even thought of that before, but it made so much sense to me. So I was like, okay, as you get faster, either over the same distance or whatever, it could be just from beginning to end. And yeah, it's hand timing. And now you could do it with these great new apps when you're shooting video. You could actually time it more exactly. But as your speed increases, you should be able to convert into more lift. In order to do that, you're going to need more flight time because the parabola is going to change. And the base of the parabola, my contention is the faster you're on, the base of your parabola is going to get wider, because I think you're going to lose a little bit through the vertical part. I've only jumped against a few people that tended to hit vertical straight up and down every time, which were infuriating. They were awesome to watch. One, I had the honor of getting to compete against Sotomayor. The two people that I saw do it all the time that were amazing. I got to jump against Lee Balkin for years. He was a teammate of mine for my first 2 years. And then, he would continue to come to UCLA meets when he was still competing. So he had that knack, man. He hit vertical at takeoff. You could see it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you basically look at your toe when it's leaving the ground and your shoulder tilt and everything else. And some people would be like this, and some people would be like this. And as their toe is leaving the ground, if they are literally going straight up, you can see it. It's measurable. If you're tilted across, maybe your body's lined up straight like this, but it's tilted towards the bar. Nobody tilts away from the bar. Now, I have had a couple jumpers hit what I would call inside vertical when they're doing pop-ups and stuff like that. And guess what? I'm here to tell you, they still got pulled across towards vertical once they started leaving the ground, and also started to drift towards the pit, even if you think you can jump away from the pit at high speed, which you can't. All right, well, that will wrap it up here tonight. I rambled quite a bit. I don't know if I'll try to save it in editing. I may just leave it out there. If you like, please subscribe and follow. And if you want to make suggestions, please send in suggestions and comments for further topics of discussion. I have a couple of ideas coming up about, the for those of you that are the parents of high jumpers that don't have a coach at school, coaching your own kids, what are the 5 most common mistakes, how to measure a high jump approach, things like this. So we welcome questions, and stay tuned. I'm going to do another podcast here tonight with a coach from Washington State University, and we just put out a bunch more as the days have gotten shorter and I have more time sitting around at night. I can do more podcasts. So there's more coming. All right, this is Qui-Gon Jinn signing out. No, somebody called me Qui-Gon today. I had my hair pulled back. It's getting long, so I put it back in this, so I look a little bit like Qui-Gon Jinn. All right, so this is Troy Haines signing off on Raise the Bar. Until next time, and we'll be talking with you soon. So long.